You mean that one that's right there on the table in front of you?
Yeah. Are you recording? Mm-hmm.
My name is Dina Reeder, and I am in the introductory speech class through Ivy Tech. This is my introduction speech. I wanted to share I am 35 years old, have 3 small children, and am married, and this is my second year in classes at Ivy Tech. My major is physical therapy assisting, and my introductory speech consists of the qualities that I have gotten from growing up in a small town. When I started thinking about a way to introduce myself, the small town came into play because that's really the only place I've ever lived. We've come from a close-knit family and have learned the importance of neighbors and extended family. As a child, we started our days off with chores. You did your chores first, you played second. We would play outside till dark a lot of days with my siblings and friends from around the neighborhood. We would spend our days riding bikes and playing games outside. We learned how to work with our parents. We worked in the garden. We picked green beans when it was 100 degrees in the middle of the afternoon, and then you snapped them all afternoon too. We would paint fences, and I was riding a lawnmower to mow the yard by the time I was 7, which you don't see very often now. You'd probably get in trouble for sending your 7-year-old out now to mow the yard. We also would combine work with fun. I remember one specific day when we would roof the wood house, which is what we use to stack and keep firewood in until the winter. I worked with my dad the entire day. We worked outside. We worked until it was dark. I remember sitting on top of the wood house and watching the sunset behind the field behind our block and realizing how tiring it was to work outside all day. At the end of the day, sitting on that roof, I remember my dad reaching into his pocket and pulling out some change and giving me some money for helping him work on the roof all day. I was maybe 6 years old at the time. I remember Mom making us lunch and me feeling like a really big person considering I got to have lunch with Dad and then get back up on the roof again to shingle the roof. Another project that I did with my dad that sticks out is working on top of a rental house that they owned that was right next door to our family home. I was maybe 7 years old on top of the roof of a 2-story home when my mom came driving around the corner after dropping my brothers off at Boy Scouts. She nearly wrecked the car when she looked up and saw that her daughter was on top of the roof of the 2-story house. Mom's reaction was a lot of the fun that day. My dad and I rebuilt motorcycles in his garage, did a lot of work in there, and accidentally set the motorcycle on fire one day. I remember seeing flames fly, and I learned very quickly how fast you can go get the hose and bring it around the house. Additional blessings of our small town were wonderful neighbors that we had. We had Mr. and Mrs. Thackeray that lived across the street, and they were an older married couple. I would watch out the window for Mr. Thackeray, and anytime he was outside, I would ask my mom if I could go over and play in his yard. I learned from them to respect your elders and to address them properly. I remember going over and tumbling out in his yard and didn't realize until I was an adult that it was a treat for both of us, not just for me. Even having the scary lady next door, who I swore owned 1,000 cats in the house. Her name was Georgia. She was a very unique person. The only time I ever saw her outside was when she would come out to yell at us kids for playing in our own yard. It still taught you respect, and my parents still taught me that you treat her with respect because she was your elder. As I moved into my teenage years, I learned the true lesson of love thy neighbors. We had a new family move in next door and became very quick friends with them. We would work together. If they had a project going, we would work over there. If we had one going, they would come to our house and help. That included shoveling snow and cleaning out the drains after a big spring rain. One of the neatest things about the family next door was their teenage daughter, who was a few years younger than me. When I would be outside cleaning my very first car, which was a brown station wagon, she would come out begging me to let her scrub the tires on my car. That's one of the joys that I learned since I was the youngest in the family of having someone younger than you. They always did the jobs that you really didn't want to do. I was dreaming of the big city at that time, but then quickly realized after high school that I wanted to stay where I was at. It wasn't the right time for college right after school, so I worked 3 jobs instead because I loved working. I was offered a management position with a large retailer, and they put me through their management training school. I was continuing to move up and still dreaming of the big dream of the corporate job. Until one day I met the man that I would marry. We've now been married nearly 13 years, and my husband moved from a much larger city to our little town here. He had quite an adjustment period, and one of the first things I remember about him being in town is we were out walking, and all of a sudden a van pulled up beside us and stopped. A gentleman jumped out of the van, and my husband instantly put me behind him and was ready to take on this gentleman that jumped out of the van. Little did he know at the time it was a local minister that wanted to invite us to his church. Then we started our family, and we were expecting our first child, and we moved into a larger home in the same little town. It was then that I learned that not only Mr. and Mrs. Thackeray were wonderful neighbors, but so were our neighbors Bill and Ben. They have been one of the biggest blessings in our life, and they are now the Mr. and Mrs. Thackeray to my children. As soon as our daughter sees them outside, she's instantly running out the door to go swing with her friends. In conclusion, growing up in a small town and passing those values on to our children is one of the best life lessons I've ever learned. I've learned that family isn't just by bloodlines, but also extended family, and they can be some of the most important people in your lives. It's a support system like no other in our small town, because there's always someone there if you need some help. My husband and I want to give our children the gifts that I have received from living here in this little town. The big city is wonderful, but I would not be happily married, mother of 3 healthy children, and have the faith and life lessons learned had I moved into the big city. Thank you.